I used to believe that love meant giving, that the more I gave, the more I would be safe, but love, his kind of love, was just a cage built with soft lies, lined with cold silk, locked from the outside. My name is Elena Marek. I was once the lucky wife, the one married to the beloved Dr. Tomasz Marek, the man with the sharp jawline, perfect white coat, and an even whiter smile he flashed to every nurse under 30. They said I was blessed. They saw us at fundraisers, church services, and clinic galas, matching outfits, charming laughter, a hand placed just right on my lower back, like I belonged to him. I did. For 17 years, I belonged to the image, to the story, to the lie. In the beginning, he made me feel chosen. I was a village girl from the outskirts of Nauichihes. He was the rising star at the medical school in Crack W. When he looked at me like I mattered, I thought I had won the lottery, but I didn't win. I just volunteered for a prison I couldn't name yet. He slowly rewrote my life in gestures that looked like love to others. You don't need to work, Lena. I can provide everything. No need to keep friends who don't understand our life now. Let me pick your dress for the gala. You always look best when I choose. So I stopped working. Stopped seeing Zofia, my best friend since childhood. Stopped dressing for myself. Stopped speaking slowly. In rooms where he spoke louder, people said I was graceful, calm, polished. I was hollow. The first time I caught him cheating, I didn't scream. It was with a brunette nurse named Agnieszka. She was barely older than our dishwasher. I confronted him. He didn't deny it. He said, it was meaningless. You're my wife. That's what matters. And stupidly no, lovingly I stayed. I told myself it was a phase, that men like him, with power, always stray but return home. Except he didn't stray. He moved into a life with secrets, whispers, and a carefully curated public image that used me as a backdrop. And when I started asking again why he came home later, why his phone was always on silent, something shifted. He no longer needed to seduce me into silence. Now, he would enforce it. The first time he raised his voice, I flinched. The second time, he threw my perfume bottle against the wall. The third time, I told my sister, and a week later, I was admitted to a private mental wellness clinic for exhaustion and paranoid tendencies. On the file under next of kin, it listed him. Under diagnosis, it read, delusional jealousy, possible personality instability, needs monitored rest. And just like that, I was no longer Elena Marek. I was a liability, a broken mind, a record, a problem, to be buried. They thought I'd stay in that clinic silent, sedated, rewritten. They thought I'd never walk out, that my shame would keep me hiding. But here I am. My name is Elena Marek, and I remember everything. I remember the smirk he wore the day he dropped off divorce papers at the clinic. I remember the way the nurses pitied me. But no one questioned him. I remember how it felt to be erased methodically, elegantly, as only a master manipulator could. But most of all, I remember who I used to be before him, and I'm ready to meet her again, or better yet, to let her rise from the ashes and write her own ending this time. They call it a profession of healing, but some doctors don't heal. They cut, they carve, they leave no scars on the body, only on your truth. When I walked out of the clinic, no one noticed. There was no press, no phone call, no husband, only a nurse who silently handed me a brown envelope filled with my medical report and the soft echo of the door clicking shut behind me. I didn't go back to Crack W. Not yet. Instead, I spent the next year in Warsaw, under the name Eli Nauika, a name borrowed from my grandmother, the strongest woman I'd ever known. She'd once survived war, famine, and 2 miscarriages. I thought I could borrow some of her courage too. I found work cleaning in a boutique hotel near Nauichihes. No one asked questions. I scrubbed floors by day, read court documents by night, and watched every press release from the Marek Medical Foundation like it was a crime scene I'd once lived in. They flourished. Dr. Tomasz Marek was now featured on morning talk shows. He launched a women's wellness initiative. He donated to a mental health charity in honor of his late wife's struggle. Latewife.as if I had died. And in a way, I had, but not completely. Id started with a receptionist. Her name was Natalia. I recognized her in a photo beside Tomasz on a conference website. She was younger than me, but older than Agnieszka. Pretty, soft eyes, wearing the exact earrings I'd once received from my mother-in-law on our 10th anniversary. I Reached out to her through a fake email pretending to be a journalist writing a piece on Dr. Marek's philanthropic work. I didn't expect a reply, but I got one. She asked to meet. Natalia looked tired when we met at a quiet cafe in Wyland W. I shouldn't be talking to you, she said, stirring her tea like it was the only steady thing in her life. You already are, I said. She looked at me then. Really looked. You're his ex-wife. I said nothing. She blinked. Her lips trembled, just a little. I thought you were dead. I thought I was too. And then slowly, the dam broke. She told me how he'd promised her stability, promotion, protection. How he'd begun to isolate her from her friends, control her schedule, monitor her calls, and how, after she tried to end it, he threatened to have her evaluated for emotional instability. The same clinic I had stayed in, same doctor, same diagnosis, a copy-paste script, not just for me, for all of us. I went home that night with a tremor in my spine, not from fear, but clarity. Tomish hadn't just tried to erase me. He'd rehearsed it, refined it. There were probably others. I started making a list, not of names, but of wrongs. Every woman I could find, every intern he discarded, every quiet donation to a wellness center, every Instagram post of staged compassion. I called it the quiet ledger. I didn't know yet what I would do with it, but I knew one thing. This wasn't just about my revenge anymore. It was about ending his script so no other woman would have to forget her name just to survive. And for that, I'd need help. I'd need proof. And above all, I'd need to stop being silent. There are nights that don't end. They loop. They echo. They claw at the back of your ribs. You can run forward, rebuild, rename yourself. But that night will always chase you unless you chase it first. I had avoided thinking about that night for almost 2 years. But to stop a ghost, you have to look it in the eye. So I did. I went back to the clinic, the Siedlisko Wellness Institute. Still looks serene, a modern glass facade, nestled against the trees, all soft beige interiors and air that smelled of eucalyptus and erasure. I booked a consultation under the name Eli Nauika, claiming stress and insomnia. They welcomed me like I was money wrapped in trauma. I asked to see my previous records. The receptionist hesitated. You've been here before? She asked. I'd like to know what my previous file says. Do you remember your patient ID? I gave her the number. It hadn't left me. She went quiet for a moment, then stood up. One moment. I'll call the administrator. They didn't expect me to read French, but I did. They didn't expect me to remember the name of the doctor who signed my intake, but I did. Dr. Hubert W. Ziok, a man who'd once smiled at me as I cried in a bathrobe, telling me it was all in my head. Now, his signature stared back at me from the intake form, except this time, it wasn't mine beneath it. My consent to be admitted form had a signature, but it wasn't mine. It was a shaky imitation, slightly too round on the E, a slant that bent the wrong way. I knew it like I knew my own breath, and next to it, Tomish Marek, listed as next of kin and emergency executor, like I was dead already. I excused myself to the restroom and took photos of every page. On my way out, I passed a nurse who once handed me sedatives and told me, just rest, dear. You're overthinking again. She smiled at me now like I was a stranger. I smiled back. That's when it hit me. They don't recognize me because I no longer look like a victim. I no longer shuffle. I no longer wait for permission. I uncover. I remember. That night, I laid every page out across my bed, printed versions, digital copies, side by side with my real signature from old employment files, even my marriage license. I called Natalia. I found it, I said. He forged my consent. A pause. Then, you can press charges. Not yet, Elena. No, if I strike too soon, they'll call it emotional retaliation. We need more. Then what are you going to do? I stared at the copy of my forged signature and whispered, I'm going to build a grave. Not for him, for every lie he ever told. Every woman who walked away in silence. I see you now. Every whispered warning, every deleted text, every tear wiped before it could fall. They weren't weaknesses. They were the ashes. And I'm here to light the fire. The file with my forged signature was not just a memory. It was evidence. But evidence alone doesn't change the story. People don't believe the truth. They believe the version told first and loudest. And Tomish had told his version so well. He wore grief like a designer coat. He performed penance with grace and applause. But Now it was my turn to speak, and I wouldn't scream. I would whisper where it hurt the most behind his perfect curtain. I started with 3 women: Natalia, who had already risked her job to speak with me; Joanna, a junior surgeon who had been abruptly fired after rejecting Tomash's mentorship; and Marta, a receptionist who had signed a strict NDA but secretly forwarded me the internal HR report on unauthorized prescription access. 3 women, 3 stories, 3 lives reduced to cautionary footnotes in his rise. I didn't ask them for revenge, I asked them to tell the truth anonymously. We launched a blog, The Foundation Cracks, a quiet, clean space where stories spoke without screaming. No names, no accusations. Just truth, raw, trembling, unedited. In the first 48 hours, it had 2,000 anonymous views. In 5 days, there were 12 stories, all different, all the same. He said I was unstable. I said I was scared. He said it was mentorship. I said it was manipulation. He said I owed him silence. I say I owe myself more. Meanwhile, in the public eye, Tomash glowed brighter than ever. He was preparing to receive a national award for medical ethics and integrity. It would be televised. It would be elegant. It would be his downfall. But I wasn't ready yet to crash the ceremony. Not until I had something undeniable. Not until the next piece fell into place, the one I couldn't predict. His own mother. Her name was Alicia Marek, widowed early, strict, deeply religious, and always kind to me in the way polite women are kind to strangers. I hadn't spoken to her since the clinic. I assumed she believed Tomash, like everyone else, but one day, I received a message from a throwaway email, subject line, "I never believed him," and below that, "He forged your signature. I warned him not to. He said you wouldn't remember." I sat frozen. Her next line read, "I have the footage." I called her. "Alicia, you still call me that," she said. "You're the only one who says my name gently. I thought you hated me." "No, Elena. I thought you'd never come back." She invited me to her flat, a quiet second-floor walk-up in the old part of Crack W. She wore black, not for mourning, for resolve. "I've protected him long enough," she said. Without even sitting down, she handed me a USB drive. "There's a security camera in the hallway of my summer home. You were staying there, remember? He came the night before your admission with the papers." "What papers?" "Your medical admission form, already signed. He practiced your signature on a napkin over dinner." My breath caught. "You knew." I begged him to stop. "He said he was handling a crisis, that you'd thanked him later, and you didn't say anything for 2 years." She nodded. "And now?" She looked me dead in the eye. "Now I want my soul back." That night, I didn't cry. I watched the footage 14 times, the napkin, the laughter, the forged stroke of my name, practiced like a spell. I wasn't watching my ex-husband. I was watching a performance, one he'd done 100 times, one he thought no one would ever rewind. But I was here now, with proof, with names, with voices that wouldn't vanish this time, and with one final whisper waiting to become a scream. They thought silence meant surrender. But some women aren't quiet because they're weak. They're quiet because they're listening, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike with precision. I no longer wept, not for what I lost, not for who I was, not even for the years taken from me in white rooms and white lies. Tears have their place, but they weren't part of the plan anymore. Now I needed clarity, focus, fire. The National Award Ceremony for Medical Ethics and Integrity was set for Saturday night, a black tie gala at the Warsaw Grand Opera House. All the right faces, all the wrong truths. Tomash would walk in wearing a tuxedo, smile for the cameras, thank his mother, deliver a speech about compassion, and I would be in the room, not with a knife, not with a gun, but with truth dressed in velvet. I wore a deep blue gown borrowed from Marta, the receptionist who once signed an NDA out of fear and now stood beside me with quiet pride. My hair was pulled back, my voice ready. We had set up the final move with surgical precision, a hidden USB in the sound booth, a prepared segment to honor the winner's humanitarian journey, and at the heart of it, the security footage of Tomash forging my name. The event organizers thought it was part of the tribute. They had no idea they were about to air a confession. He stood on stage as expected, confident, smug. "I believe medicine," he began, "is not just about the body. It's about the soul." A murmur of approval, flashing cameras. "And though I have faced personal loss," he paused, eyes soft, "I have never lost faith in humanity." I almost laughed. Behind the curtain, I gave the cue. A soft chime, then. The screen lit up behind him, not with his biography, with the hallway footage, his hand, the napkin, my forged name, then side by side a scan of the official medical form he submitted. Perfect match, perfect betrayal. The audience went silent, and then came my voice, over the speakers. He said I was unstable, but I remember everything. He said I was paranoid, but I saw clearly. He said he loved me, but he signed me away. This is the doctor you applaud. This is the man I married. This is the truth I buried until tonight. Gasps. A woman in the front row dropped her champagne flute. Thomas froze, eyes darting toward the sound booth, toward the stage manager, toward anything that wasn't the screen. But there was nowhere left to run. The audience didn't boo. They just stared, unblinking, finally seeing. Afterward, I didn't stay. I walked out the side exit. The air was cold. It felt like baptism. I turned my phone on. It was already buzzing. Journalists, lawyers, women, strangers, messages poured in. I saw what you did. Thank you for speaking. He did it to me too. I didn't respond yet. Instead, I walked to the park across the opera house. Natalia was waiting there, sitting on a bench, holding 2 cups of tea. You did it, she whispered. No, I said. We did, and then, quietly, we sat 2 women once erased, now watching the smoke rise from a stage that once silenced them, not crying, not hiding, just breathing, just beginning. They used to say I disappeared, but the truth is I just stepped out of the frame. Now I walk back in, not to belong again, but to take what was mine. 3 days after the gala, I went back to the house that once held my wedding dress, my dreams, and my quiet surrender. The curtains had changed, so had the furniture, but the bones were the same: cold marble, floors to many mirrors, and a front door that never truly belonged to me. I rang the bell. The housekeeper opened. It wasn't the one I knew. Elena? She asked, stunned. Yes, I said. I'm home. Thomas wasn't there. Of course not. He was unreachable, according to the hospital. On leave, according to the media. A victim of cancel culture, according to the trolls online. But I wasn't there for him. I was there for the part of myself I had left behind. I walked through the rooms like they were museum exhibits, each space echoing with pieces of my silence. The kitchen where I'd learned how to serve without asking for anything back. The living room where I sat perfectly poised next to him while guests praised his brilliance and ignored my existence. The bedroom where I learned how cold love can be when it's just performance. And the closet, the one he'd once reorganized to match my lifestyle. I found it there, tucked in the corner behind a forgotten suitcase. The red scarf, the one my sister gave me before she moved to Sweden. The one I used to wear before Thomas said it clashed with his navy coats. I wrapped it around my shoulders and stood there. It didn't clash. It burned. I left with only a few things: a photo of my parents, a leather notebook filled with poems I never dared to share, and a key, one he didn't know I still had. Not to this house. A flat I bought years ago with my inheritance under my maiden name, long forgotten. I had kept it quiet, hidden, almost ashamed. But now it was my sanctuary. The world outside wasn't quiet either. The video had gone viral. Talk shows debated ethics and manipulation. Newspapers split between brave whistleblower and scorned wife. And Thomas, he issued a statement. I deeply regret that my personal struggles have impacted my public work. I never intended harm. My actions came from a place of love and desperation. I ask for privacy as I seek healing. Healing? I almost laughed again. He used the same vocabulary he once used on me. Delicate, sensitive, misunderstood. But this time, the world wasn't swallowing it whole, because I was no longer the only voice. Natalia, Joanna, Marta, dozens more. They were speaking now, writing, standing, and they were using their names, because I had used mine first. On the 6th night after the gala, I hosted them. In my flat, my space. No husbands, no lies, no mirrors. Just women, just truth. We lit candles, not for mourning but for marking something sacred. The return, the reckoning, the reclaiming. We made tea, we shared stories. Some of us cried, but none of us were broken. Not anymore. The end of the night, Marta turned to me. What now, Elena? You've exposed him. You've reclaimed yourself. What comes next? I looked around the room, at the light, at the red scarf folded over the back of the chair, and I smiled. Now, I said, now I live out loud. When a woman speaks the truth, the world calls her angry. But when she speaks with power, they call her dangerous. Let them call me what they want, I no longer answer to fear. The blog didn't die after the gala. It bloomed. The foundation cracks had become more than just a site. It became a map of survival. Each entry a wound named, each comment a candle lit for someone who had once felt alone. I moderated the stories now, with help from Natalia and Joanna. And sometimes in the quiet hours after midnight, I'd whisper a name out loud just so the silence would know it could no longer swallow us. But I hadn't expected what came next. An envelope. No return address. Inside, a photograph of me, not recent, older, from university. I was standing near the old campus bridge in Pozna, hair windblown, smiling like the world still had soft corners. And on the back of the photo, written in looping handwriting, I knew you'd return. You were never just his shadow, eh? My hands trembled. It couldn't be. Adrian, the one who left for Berlin the year before I met Tomasz, the only man who ever told me I was too much and meant it as a compliment. We had kissed under rain. We had written letters. And then, he had vanished. Or maybe I had chosen Tomasz because I thought safety looked like silence. I thought I buried that chapter, but the photo said otherwise. That weekend, I went to the old bookstore on Chamilna Street, the one I used to love but hadn't dared enter since I returned. And there he was, standing by the philosophy section, holding a worn copy of Camus. He turned slowly, like he had been waiting. Elena, I didn't speak. He smiled, gentle, no pity in his eyes. I saw the video. Most people did. I didn't come to judge. I came to say something I should have said 10 years ago. I raised a brow. You told me once you'd disappear into someone else's shadow just to avoid being seen. My throat tightened. I never believed you meant it. But when I heard your voice on that recording, Elena, it was like hearing someone wake up after a long sleep. Silence. Then, you're awake now. We sat in the cafe downstairs. He didn't ask questions that bled. He didn't poke my scars. He just sat, like a place to rest. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a kind of future that didn't begin with war. A future where the story isn't just about vengeance, but about what you build after the fire dies down. That night, I walked home under a sky cracked with stars, and I wrote the final line of my next blog post. They tried to bury me in silence. But now I sing in echoes they can't quiet. Not for revenge. For every woman still waiting to return to herself. You can't rewrite the past, but you can stand beside it and say, you don't own me anymore. When the Siedlisko Wellness Institute invited me to speak at their annual symposium on patient autonomy, I almost deleted the email. The irony nearly made me laugh. 2 years ago, they took my autonomy, tucked it inside a file folder, and stamped it unstable. And now, they wanted me to speak? I reread the message. We believe your story has become a valuable voice in the ongoing conversation around patient rights. We hope to learn. We hope to grow. Maybe they had changed. Maybe they were scared. Maybe it didn't matter. I said, yes, but not because they deserved it, because I did. I stood in the exact same auditorium where doctors once nodded while Tomasz handed over a forged admission form. This time, I wore a white suit. No jewelry. No makeup. Just clarity. And when I stepped up to the microphone, the air crackled. Half the room knew my name. The other half recognized my story. All of them had seen the video. Good morning, I began. My name is Elena Marek, but for 2 years, I answered to something else. Patient 2031B. Today, I want to talk about what happens when care becomes control, when silence is prescribed instead of empathy, and what it takes for a woman to forgive the world and herself for letting it happen. I told them everything. Not the tabloid version, not the blog summary. I told them about the numbness that comes from being gaslit with smiles, about the sedation that makes you forget you once had dreams, about the terrifying moment when you realize you've been written out of your own story by someone who claimed to love you. And then, I told them about the red scarf, the forgotten key, the blog, the women, the fire. They called me broken. I believed them, but healing didn't start when they changed their minds. Healing started the day I decided to stop hiding from myself. I looked up. Some were crying. Some were still. All were listening. Forgiveness isn't for those who hurt you. It's for the version of you who survived them. I came back today to forgive her. The girl in the hallway. The woman in the robe. The voice they tried to bury. Silence. Then, Applause. Not polite, not curated. Real. After the speech, a young therapist approached me. She looked barely 30. I've been struggling. She whispered. I thought I was too emotional to do this work, but you made me realize. Maybe empathy is the work. I held her hand. Then do it with your whole heart, I said. Even if they tell you it's too much. Later that night, I stood outside the clinic one last time. I looked up at the windows, remembered the night they told me I was safe, and the scream I never let out. Then I whispered softly, you don't own me anymore, and walked away, not broken, not erased, just free. Sometimes the ghost you fear most doesn't scream through the night. It whispers through an envelope and forces you to feel again. It arrived on a Thursday. No stamp, no postmark, just a hand-delivered envelope slid under my apartment door. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Thomas, even now, months after the fallout, his script was still neat, still too perfect. Like he had spent his life practicing sincerity. For a full hour, I didn't open it. I just stared, because letters are heavier than they look, especially when they come from the man who signed you into silence. Inside, a single sheet of paper. No greeting. No excuses. Just this. Elena, I watched your speech. I didn't recognize you, not because you were different, but because for the first time, I saw you without the filter of my own ego. I need to say this, even if it means nothing to you. Even if you burn this letter. I did what they said I did. I forged your signature. I tampered with your records. I told them you were not safe. The truth is, I wasn't safe. From my career, from my failure, from losing control. So I controlled you instead. You didn't go mad. You went quiet. And I mistook that silence for victory. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't want redemption. But I need you to know you were never the broken one. Tomashi read it once. Then again. My hands didn't shake. I didn't cry. I didn't feel pity. What I felt was strange release. Not because he deserved it, but because I didn't deserve to carry his weight anymore. His guilt wasn't mine. His lies weren't stitched into my skin anymore. He had finally said what I knew all along. I was never crazy, just inconvenient. That night, I took the letter and walked to the old square, the same place I once waited hours for him to show up with flowers and apologies. This time, I stood alone. I held the letter under a flickering street lamp and lit a match, not out of hatred, but out of ritual. As the paper curled into flame, I whispered, I do not forgive you, but I no longer need to. Later, I returned home to find a new blog entry submitted to the foundation. Cracks.it wasn't anonymous. It was signed, Adrian K. Berlin, and it read, I once loved a woman who forgot how to roar. She has found her voice again, and I am learning how to listen. I smiled. The past may knock, but I didn't have to answer in fear anymore. Now, I opened the door on my own terms. They tried to erase her story, so she picked up the pen and wrote with fire. I used to think endings came with silence, that justice felt like applause, that healing came after the war. But that was before I learned that some victories look like breakfast for one in a sunlit kitchen you bought with your own money. Before I understood that love can return not in the arms of someone who saves you but in the hands you extend toward yourself, without shame. It's been 3 months. Thomas lost his medical license. The hospital issued a public apology and opened a permanent panel for former psychiatric patients to share their experiences. Some call it the Elena effect. I call it long overdue. I now lead writing circles for women who were once silenced. Some come with journals full of black ink and fury. Some come with trembling hands and empty pages. All of them bring truth. I never tell them how to begin. I just tell them this. You don't owe anyone your silence, but you owe yourself your story. One night, after our session, I stayed back. The room was quiet. I looked down at my own notebook and wrote one final line beneath the heading. Closure. I was the wife they tried to bury, but I grew roots. I broke through. I bloomed. Adrian visits often now. We don't talk about Thomas. We talk about poetry, about Berlin, about what it means to love someone without trying to fix them. He once asked me, do you still believe in happy endings? I smiled. Not happy, I said, but honest. On the day my divorce was finalized, I didn't cry. I bought myself tulips, red ones, the color of blood, fire, and rebirth. I placed them in the center of the table, not to celebrate leaving a man but to honor the woman who stayed standing. Final message to you, the reader. If you've ever been silenced, doubted, or made to Feel invisible, know this. You are not broken. You are not too much. And you are not alone. The world may try to write your story for you, but you hold the pen, pick it up, begin again. And when you do, write in your own voice, loud, clear, and unapologetically you.